Sahana vavatu, sahanau bhunaktu, saha viryam karavavahai, tejasvinavaditam astu ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. May that one protect us both. May that one nourish us both. May we work together with great energy and vigor. May our study be illumined. May we not unnecessarily cavil with each other. Peace, peace, peace be unto all. Om Shri Rama Rama Ramiti Rame Rame Manorame Sahasranama Tutulyam Ramanama Varanani. We delight in the beautiful name of Shri Ram. Again and again, for even once we remember it, just once, the name of Sri Rama bestows a fruit that is equal to the recitation of 1,000 names of Vishnu. So we are continuing our story of Rama, and we have to recap where we are at the moment. You'll recall that Ravana by now has taken Sita to his magnificent palace. One question that always arises in the reciting these historical accounts, two historical accounts are there, classified as itihasas, historical accounts, story of Rama and the Mahabharata. So when Sita arrives there and is there in Ravana for the first time, against his own nature, is prostrating to Sita with 10 heads. And then you wonder, if this is historical, how can a person have 10 heads? And so we have to distinguish with what we call demonic and also divine. And the Bhagavad Gita helps us out with this. So the 16th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita will tell us exactly the difference. And we have some 26 characteristics that we can adopt and cultivate. Of course, that's a big task. But it gives us a flavor for what is classified as divine and what is classified as demonic. And some people are born with divine traits and some are born with demonic traits. That means that it's not that life begins off in a linear way from the birth and goes on and finishes with a full stop. But it's understood that there must be, and the whole of nature emulates this, a whole round, a circularity. So what we call death is only a comma, not a full stop. That's a fundamental thing that we have to understand. Shri Bhagavan Uvacha Apayam Sattva Samsudhir Jnana Yoga Vyavastihi Dhanam Damascha Yajnascha Swadhyayastapa Arjavam. So naturally it begins off with the Lord Krishna telling us something. Shri Bhagavan Uvacha, the Blessed Lord, said this. What is he saying? He's delineating, beginning with Abhayam, fearlessness. Now most people are suffering from fear. And the mother of all fears is the fear of death. All the others are subsidiary to that. The fear of not existing. And so the profound philosophy, the highest conclusion, will say that there are no two things. And if there are no two things, there's no fear. And we experience this in one state of our consciousness called dreamless sleep. In dreamless sleep, there's no second to argue with. There's no second to have a disagreement with, or resentment against, or jealousy. And so when we realize the oneness of all existence, then all that fear goes away. We can say then, in that sense, that our goal is abhaya, fearlessness. But look at the circumstances, even in the story of Rama. And fear is there, there's no doubt, even in the most cultivated of us. And so it's a bit like people running in a race. The trained athlete and the one who hasn't trained will run the 100 meters. They will both be breathing very hard, they'll both be exhausted, but the one that is trained will recover quicker. And the one that hasn't trained will collapse on the floor. So fearlessness is a fundamental quality that has to be cultivated. Purity of heart, steadfast in knowledge and yoga. What does it mean? Yoga is a practice. But the practice has no value unless there's a principle, a well understood principle behind it. And those people who have knowledge will be quiet people. There's a Jewish saying, and that is that somebody who has no knowledge will have a lot to say, and somebody who says nothing will know. Somebody who does not know will say, and somebody who knows will not say. And so charity, a spirit of giving, all these are sattvic qualities, no motive, no selfish motive in mind. Self-control, sacrifice, study of the scriptures, austerity, uprightness. Is a more exhaustive list than we have in the brief summary that is told in the Patanjali Yoga Sutras under the category of yama, self-control. But then non-injury, truthfulness, absence of anger, renunciation, tranquility, aversion to fault-finding. If you think that life is bad and you don't see it as the divine author of the life sees it, then you'll always be trying to find fault and criticizing, not only yourself but others. Compassion to beings, non-covetousness, gentleness, modesty, absence of fickleness. It starts off that ahimsa, satyam, akrodas, tyagaha, shantir, apayashanam, daya, bhuteshva, aloluptavam, bardhavan, and hriya, achapalam. These are listed qualities. It doesn't end there. Vigor, energy, strength, forgiveness, so tejaha, kshama, fortitude, purity, absence of malice, and overbearing pride. So these are all ones born and characteristic of those in a divine state. And you may say, are we not all born with this potentiality? The answer is yes. So we have to build on what we have and cultivate what we don't have. What about the other side of it? So this is the Rama side of it. The Rama, Sita, Lakshmana side of it. What about the other side of it? What about the Ravana side of it and the Rakshasa side of it? So here we have a list. Dambo, Darpo, it goes like that. Ostentation. Ostentation. That is a kind of display. Display, look at me. Even in religion you'll find it. You put all kinds of things on your head. Look at me. And you may think, oh, well, of course there are two motives for doing it. One may be, maybe when I put it on, then I feel a certain purity, or it could be traditionalism, and it could be a message to other people. Look at me, I belong to this sect. I'm a Vaishnavite, I'm a Shaivite, I'm this, I'm that. See? You can put a big cross on your forehead, maybe. There's a satirical comedy like that, where people come in around about the Middle Ages, and they have two crosses on their shoulders and one on their head, just in case you make any mistake about their affiliation. But ostentation in the way you dress, in the way you present yourself to others, arrogance, all of this is subject to egoism. Arrogance, self-conceit, anger, harshness, ignorance. You get the idea. All of these belong to one who's born for the demonic state. And all of these, therefore, are characteristics of Ravana. And the cultivation and some of these will be automatically cultivated, others will just be the product of lack of self-control. And so we have Ravana, and Ravana has a great deal of control because he's a meditator. How else will he get all the boons? So meditation is no guarantee of all the qualities that we have mentioned. So Ravana has taken Sita around his magnificent palace. He's taken her around the exquisite pleasure gardens, thinking that she will buy into this, thinking that she is material-minded, thinking that she's a princess, and therefore, all these things will be appeal to her, and probably will outweigh anything that she's been used to, either in her father, Janaka's palace, or in Duryodhana's palace. not Duryodhana, sorry, Dhritarashtra's palace. He displays his incalculable treasures of gold and silver and gems and ornaments. And he who had never bent his head before a woman now touches the feet of Sita. And he touches it with his 10 heads. Why 10? Because you see, all of these demonic characteristics all rely on the sense organs. And we have 10 of them. Actually, we have 11. The mother of all of them, the queen bee, is the mind itself. These are organs of reception, organs of information, organs of reaction. And these are fundamental to our control. When we talk about tapasya, we talk about generating a friction, going against our habit, to try to form a new habit. And if we don't do that, then the old habits will be there. And that would be our true nature. True nature is something that is difficult to change. Of course, it's not a fundamental true nature. And ignorance is non-acknowledgement of this fact. So Sita was blind to the opulent wealth and deaf to the tempting flattery. It made no impact on her whatsoever. Don't forget, she lived in the forest very happily. And Ravana gives her time to reconcile and ordered a group of demonesses to keep her captive in the Ashoka Grove. If I can't persuade her, then other people will do it. Delegation. They were to adopt all possible means, fair and foul, both, to win her over to Ravana. And just in a few hours, this was the plight in which the circumstances are that Sita is placed in. So this is just a recollection of what we have been through in previous talks. But now we shift the scene, as it were, because on the other side, Rama is there, and this is where we left off. What is Rama's condition? He realizes, and Lakshmana realizes also, the trick that Maricha has played. And now they realize, and they're now panicking. They're now going back as quickly as possible to where they left Sita. And of course, they're anxious. And so Lakshmana was right in the warning that he originally gave. But the worst part of this trick that Maricha has played is that the dying demon called out for Sita and Lakshmana's help. And in doing that, he's imitating the voice of Rama. And so naturally, they're filled with concern about the developments back at the ashram. So now we can picture them hastening back as quickly as they possibly can, and all with doubt and fear and anticipation, a feeling of dread, a feeling of negative anticipation. And of course, Lakshmana is there. The two of them make their way. This is where we left it. And again, just to remind you, why have you left Sita unprotected is Rama's admonition. And of course, the younger one is now in tears because he realizes, yes, had he actually stayed, but then he was accused so badly by Sita. So what else can I do? She threatened she would die if I didn't run to rescue you. That's how much she loves you. So I'm here. And then a feeling of dread comes in. And this is part of a drama which it touches us all, because you can imagine ourselves in the same kind of condition. Will we see Sita again is a doubt that comes. And Rama now is in a state of increasing depression. So the brothers are hurrying homeward, as we said, and then they get to the ashram and they see that it's empty. And of course, they call out to Sita and they go this hither and thither, look all around the ashram. And as they do this, they increasingly lose hope of seeing her again. And so Rama now seeks down into despair. Even Rama plays the drama. And the Rakshasas Maybe they have taken her, and they're known to be cannibals. Maybe they have eaten her. And Rama becomes absolutely stupefied. He cannot move. He's in a state of complete despair. And here we see the character of Lakshmana come up, because Lakshmana now infuses him with hope. And so this is where we pick up the story at this point. So the first thing that we notice is Rama holds Lakshmana's hands and he cries in sorrow because he's saying, why did you leave the forest? And fatigued and thirsty with the futile chase, but now overwhelmed with various emotions. Because we know that every sense of loss is a kind of bereavement. And we know very well, through a wonderful medical doctor called Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, the various stages of grief, bereavement. Every loss, no matter how small or big, is followed by, I can't believe it happened to me, and if only, and blaming and anger, all of these start coming out. And so he cries again, if I don't see Sita in the ashram when we return, he says earlier, then I shall surely die. Words like this. Now you see, Lakshmana answers and defends his position. This is where we left things off. And then Rama weeps. He wanders about like one who's mad. His eyes are bloodshot. This is the condition that Valmiki is describing. And he cries, alas, have they eaten her up? Have they carried her away? These are natural things that occur to anybody's mind. And how she must have trembled in terror. This is just heart-wrenching. I cannot bear the thought of it, he says. And could it be that she has gone to the river to fetch water? Maybe that's a possibility. Could it be that she has gone to collect some flowers? Maybe that's a possibility. Let's go and see, and they investigate every single possibility. Imagine the relief if they find she's only gone to collect flowers or water. And so they're looking for her amongst all the various places, behind the trees, behind the foliage. And Rama's sorrow swells like the sea, and he seems to have drowned his reason. Because in a contest between the intellect and a contest between emotions, emotions will always win. And it is Lakshmana's job to calm things down and install a little bit of reasoning. What we call standing back and counting to 10 a little bit. But Rama calls the trees one by one by their names and beseeches them for help. That's how close they are to nature. O Ashoka tree, be true to your name. Remove my sorrow, you must know the truth. This is one of his poetic pleas. Tell me where Sita is now. And then he addresses the palm tree in the same way. You must be able to see where Sita is. Tell me where she is. And as we know, trees don't reply. So the trees not getting any answers from there, he now talks to the animals. Don't forget, they start off with fear of unknown beings and animals, not familiar with all the creatures, but during the sojourn, they have been friends and tuned in to all the voices of the animals. And he addresses the tiger, the elephant, the deer. And he says, are you afraid to tell me the truth? Tell me. But you know no fear. You can tell me what has happened. You know everything. Tell me then the truth. Now I've just told you that one divine characteristic is fearlessness. And here we find fear. So it's not that there is an absence of fear completely. This is human. But how do we overcome? And so Valmiki is telling us, this is how you overcome fear in the most difficult circumstances. And there are plenty of examples in our modern days. We're discussing the idea there that, you see, nowhere in the history of man has there been more refugees than today. Nowhere has there been more slavery in different forms than today. Nowhere has there been more difficulties and miseries and uncertainty in life, probably, than today. We say that because we're living in this era. If we had lived, let's say, 100 years ago, if we lived to live in the from 1914 to 18, the Great War, we would feel the same. We'd feel the complete destruction. And then a few years later, let's say a few decades later, Second World War. We can't imagine. And the modern generation are so distant from that. So it's only in the history books. But still, we have no real relationship between what is happening, let's say, in Turkey, or India, or Africa, or South America. Naturally, we're looking after our local disturbances. So, how do we overcome this? We can easily plunge into negativity by listening to BBC News, or by listening to all the things, because no news is good news. It's always negative. How do we rally ourselves around and produce a state of positivity where 30 trillion human cells will vibrate well? And so these stories are not just stories. They say, yes, we understand your problem. We're not glossing it over. But the point is, how do we remedy the situation? Anyway, he cries out in desperation, "Oh, Sita, you're hiding somewhere. There, I see you there. Stop this fooling. I can stand it no longer." Even your imagination takes over, and you can imagine the best happening. So after wandering, after weeping in vain for a long time, Rama falls on the ground, mourning. This is the great hero, falls on the ground. This is his great love and attachment for his other half, the other side of the coin, his soulmate from many lives. And he says, "Ah, Lakshmana, ha Sita," and he cries like an elephant trapped in a pit, said Valmiki. Lakshmana, Sita is nowhere. The Rakshasas have captured her and torn her to pieces and eaten her up. The imagination jumps to the worst possible scenario. How can I live anymore? My end is near, but when my father sees me in the other world, he'll say, "Why have you come here, my son, before fulfilling my command?" The command means to eventually return to Ayodhya and continue taking over from his brother Bharata. And in everything I have failed. See how we talk to ourselves, took ourselves into more and more depression. All our moods are guided by our own inner script that we adopt. And so, what is the remedy? We have to adopt a different script. We have to take on a different guided meditation within ourselves. And Lakshmana, you can imagine his state. He cannot bear this sight any longer. And now he says, "Brother, it's not right that you should cry like this. Let us search through the forest." He brings in a practical element. No good sitting and weeping. Let us get up and do something. And of course, there's a spiritual dimension to this, because the resolution to all our difficulties is to pick up the search for our own inner divine dimension, as it were, our own inner self. In other words, what devout worshippers call God. But God is not absent. That's our difficulty. Never mind, as a first step in our pursuit, we assume that we are estranged, and we pick up this search. An often question asked by one of the great devotees for many years to me was, "Who is the seeker?" Well, begin off assuming that you are the seeker, and something has to be sought. And so, let us search through the forest, says Lakshmana. You know how fond Sita is of going into caves and thickets and so on. And she may be bathing in the river or playing somewhere or gathering flowers. Let's eliminate every single possibility. Let's search again. We searched once, let's do it again. She's only testing us. Come on, let us search again. Don't cry. In other words, commiserating will not help anything. Commiserating is due to our imagination taking over, and all of us are projecting this imagination. Patanjali classifies this as verbal delusion. Verbal delusion means we talk ourselves into an imaginary scene and put ourselves either into depression or elation. Udaredatmanatvanam matvanam avasadayat, says Bhagavad Gita. You see, you're going to lift yourself up by yourself or lower yourself by yourself. At the end of the day, you're your own best friend or your own worst enemy. And so the two, they search again all over the place, on the hills, by the pools, on the riverbank. They increase the area of their search perimeter, but of course they don't find her. And Sita's not to be seen. And so Rama turns to Lakshmana, his faithful brother, what shall I do now? Because I can't work out what to do. I need assistance. I need counseling. And so Lakshmana's job is like this. He tries to encourage him with words of hope. But by now, Rama is inconsolable. No, my brother, there's no hope. Sita is nowhere. I've lost her forever. I shall live no more. This is the point of his ultimate depression. And he lies unconscious for a time. And then he rallies round, he comes to himself and lifts his voice and he weeps. Nothing that Lakshmana can say can comfort him. So if you think that you are in desperate mode, if you think that you have talked yourself into a depression, imagine even Rama, is desperate. We can't even imagine the desperation. How can I go back to Ayodhya is another consideration, he says. Won't they laugh at me for returning alone after allowing Sita to be killed and eaten by the demons, by the Rakshasas? Having brought her here to the forest, it was not only my request, I conceded to her request to accompany me. My responsibility. What will her father say? Having brought her to the forest, having failed to protect her, what shall I tell her father, Janaka? All of these things are going through his mind, exhibiting his human side. No, you should go alone to Ayodhya. Go and look after our mothers and greet Bharata from me and tell him it was my dying wish that he should continue to rule as king, because I'm going to stay here in my misery and put an end to things. And all Lakshmana's efforts to console him are just not working. They're all in vain. And he was convinced that the Rakshasa had carried away Sita and torn her to pieces and eaten her up. He himself was convinced of that. And he pictures himself in detail, the horror of her suffering, and cried in his grief, I must have committed terrible sins. How else could I be suffering? How could this suffering come to me? Sita, who accompanied me, thinking I could protect her, has been now consumed, eaten by the cannibals, by Rakshasas, and I can do nothing about it. Is there another sinner like me in the world? And of course, this gives us a historical clue that maybe in those days there were people who ate human flesh. Anyway, Lakshmana says, don't lose heart. You must be bold and energetic. But you see, somebody in this condition, this is just words that pour off. It has no meaning. There has to be something more. A resolute mind can conquer fate. Now he becomes a psychologist. But you must first conquer your weakness. Therein is the formula. You see, going back to the Bhagavad Gita, what is it? Fortitude, strength, vigor, all of these. These are essential points where we can grow and develop and get around all the considerable obstacles that we have. Apart from a philosophy that says these are obstacles, not put in our way against us, but so that we can learn how to get around the difficulty. because we have the equipment to do it. And so, conquer your weakness. This is the same message that Krishna gives to Arjuna. Stand up, be strong, conquer your weakness. Because weakness and ignorance are the same thing. Let's make a more thorough search of the forest. Let's, instead of yielding to unavailing sorrow, let us be manly and active. But Rama is not in a mood to listen at this point. And sometimes we prefer to be in a state of depression. So Rama is behaving as a human being, not an avatar of Vishnu at this point. And though elsewhere his words and actions give room for a different view, here Valmiki is describing Rama as a mere person, as a mere human, enveloped in the gloom of a supreme misfortune. How else would the avatara have compassion and understand the human condition unless they themselves go through sorrow? And so his feeling and behavior are exactly those of any noble and virtuous person who has lost his beloved wife, and who has lost his beloved wife who is dearer to him than life itself, his soulmate, his other half. And that in a forest infested with Rakshasas, with evil forces. And we shall see that all the efforts of Lakshmana to console him at this point have no effect whatsoever. And so our common human dharma is illustrated by the sorrow of Rama. We see here a picture of true, equal love between a virtuous man and a woman and the anguish of loss. And so this episode can also be interpreted allegorically as well, because Rama's sense of privation when he misses Sita is a measure, an image of the mind of God when a single human soul is lost through ignorance. And from a philosophical point of view, we can see that Sita can represent the Jiva, and Rama can represent the Atman. And this estrangement is painful. We have to get back to our own nature. Now, the episode can be interpreted in many different ways, therefore, and one can ask whether God can lose or can suffer pain of mind. Is this theologically possible? And if one realizes that all life is divine, a divine play, a lila, this is the rescuing philosophical part. And so, Krishna says in the Bhagavatam, I am playing a game. This lila is on myself. And if you understand this component, it's a hugely important understanding that there's no other expression for life except that this is a drama, this is a play. And so, this divine lila, this divine play of God, no further exegesis is needed to explain it. Sin, merit, devotion, all are aspects of that one sport. But it doesn't look like a sport when we are involved in the tragic side, in other words, the interpretation of tragedy. And each one of us is beloved of the Lord. We have to understand that as well. God is love. This is the single common format in devotional worship in all religions, that God is not loving, God is love itself. And if for any reason we are swept away from the right path, then a person suffers like a lover has lost his love. And the sorrow, too, is a part of this great play. And so the two brothers, they search every mountain, every forest, every riverbank, calling Sita's name loud, but all is in vain. And they didn't so much as find a clue anywhere. And so baffled and grief-stricken, Rama cries out against the river Godavari, against the gods, against the five elements. And the five elements are gods themselves. We have to very, very much understand the philosophical understanding of devas. We have seen the qualities that make you divine. But you see, it is the devas that have to be conquered. What are the devas? It comes from diva, meaning illuminating factor. We use it when we say Diwali, Deepavali, and so on. So the same root is there. It's an illuminating factor. The senses are illuminating factors. They illumine the world for us. The sun is an illuminating factor. All the stars are illuminating factors. But at their most subtle, the 5 tanmatras are illuminating factors. They combine and recombine and make this world which follows the rule of general relativity. The tanmatras, the subtle elements, they follow the rule of quantum. And when it comes to the surface, to the interpretive faculties, it becomes the world which is deterministic, the causal world. And so, these 5 elements and these gods are put together. And the poet sage ascribes the silence of the rivers and the gods and the elements to their fear of the powerful Rakshasa king. And then there's a herd of deer moving southwards. That's a significant thing. Because if we look carefully, nature itself will give us indications about the truth of nature itself. And they're all heading southwards. And they seem to indicate to Rama and Lakshmana that they too should also travel in the same direction. Now they pick up the clue. Nature itself gives us a direction if we are astute enough to pick it up. And in all of this will be thankfulness. When we look at the blue sky, should we not feel a sense of joy and thankfulness? When we look even at the gray clouds, should we not feel the same? Should we not recall the drama of the condensation of moisture that falls again as, the evaporation that falls as condensation and rainfall? Should we not see this drama and appreciate it? Should we not really be thankful and joyful for the very act of breathing, for the fact that the divine investor still invests life force in you because he has a purpose for you? But we somehow miss all of these things, all of these opportunities. And so nature itself gives us all the clues necessary, all the directions necessary. And so they do so. They go and travel in the southward direction. And after a time, they find some flowers scattered on the way. And Rama at once recognizes the flowers. And now his mood changes. And he cries excitedly, "These are the very flowers I gave her. They must have fallen from her hair." But you see, that initial excitement goes because his grief and anxiety now grows stronger. And he sobs aloud, fearing the very worst for Sita. Because now the clue is that she's been abducted. And they continue, they search through the forest. What is the forest? The world looks like a forest to us. Don't forget, when they first entered the forest, they were fearful. And then they realized, oh, you see, in today's modern ideas, we spend a fortune taking a holiday in the forest. You see, so the forest need not be sinister. Many people pay a lot of money to go to forest areas, preserves, reserves. What a wonderful thing. So they're searching all around for the spot where they find the flowers, and they notice the marks of Rakshasa's big feet, something like a yeti, I suppose, but anyway, and little footprints also, and they know the contrast. This is Sita's footprints, and this is the abductor. And then they go further and they find some gold beads that spilt from Sita's jewels. And Rama cries again, "Look, the Rakshasa has been chasing her like a beast of prey to tear her tender flesh." And then they see several fragments of a chariot and great clots of blood, and we know who they belong to now, as also the royal headgear and jewels scattered on the ground. And they wonder what these things could mean. And soon they come upon a large bow broken, a flag torn, and an arm that is crushed. And a little later they see the dead bodies of a charioteer and of mules. And it was clear then at this point that a vehement battle has taken place and been fought on this very spot. And the two powerful Rakshasas must have struggled here, they conclude, each claiming the sole right to eat Sita. They don't know, you see, about Jataka. And conjecturing and lamenting in this way, Rama goes on, Dharma could not save Sita. Dharma in the sense of the things that are always good and right and harmonious. And no God came to her rescue. It would be right to destroy this wicked world. Rama was beside himself and talks wildly. His grief was now going through the phase of revenge and anger. And Lakshmana does his best to calm the distracted Rama. Great sorrow unbalances all minds, even the strongest. Else, why should you thus lose your own self-control in this instance? Why should you hate and curse the whole world for the evil deed of one person? It's irrational. How often have you, my brother, calmed my own anger and led me on the right path, but now a great grief has upset your mind, and it's the turn of me, your younger brother, to give courage and counsel and patience to you, the elder person, and restore you to your natural heroism. So let's find out who our enemy is and deal with him. And with such loving words, Lakshmana now seeks to give courage and consolation, and both walk on. So they have not proceeded very far. They've gone a little way, and then they come across Jatayu. And Jatayu, bloodied and mutilated, unrecognizable, lying on the ground. At first, Rama thinks it was some Rakshasa, maybe disguising himself to deceive them. He'd been caught before. And wild with anger, cries, "Look, here is a Rakshasa who has eaten Sita." And he rushes toward him with his bow in hand. And then raising his ruffled and gory head with great pain, Jatayu speaks in a feeble voice that seems struggling against the ultimate death. "Don't kill me, dear Rama, who has but a few moments more to live. The dear princess you are searching for has been carried off by Ravana, and he could do so only by first robbing me of my life. I tried to defend her. Even in my old age, I battled, but of course, I'm old. And seeing Sita and his flying chariot in the air, I intercepted it and gave him battle. I struck down his bow and smashed his chariot, at least that much I did. And as charioteer, I slew his charioteer. And the marks of my last great fight, you can see all around this place. I did my best, and how I wish I could do better. I could have done better for your sake. But as I was weary with this great toil, and in my old age, I was still waging a hopeless battle against youth. And so I fought with my beak and my talons against the keen weapons and panoply of steel that cut off my own wings and cut off my legs, and I have now fallen wounded, and I'm about to die. But at least I have survived to tell you that she is alive." And he lifted Sita and flew with her, that's what Ravana did, into the sky in a southern direction. And though racked with the pangs of death, I have clung to life for love of you to tell you what I know. And now that I have done this, please bless me so that I can die in peace. And of course, Rama's moved by this, and tears flow from his eyes as he listens to Jatayu's tale. And he flings aside his bow and embraces the bird. And the prince's sorrow knew no bounds. And they lament loudly, rolling on the ground. "I'm the most unhappy man alive," Lakshmana said, Rama. "Giving up the kingdom, I came to the forest, and here I have lost my Sita. And this Jatayu, who is like a second father to us, he lays his own life down for my sake." This is a mark of love, of course, to lay your own life down. Why, if I fell into the fire, I fear my bad luck would put even the fire out. If I fell into the sea, I fear it would dry up. What a terrible sinner I am, Lakshmana. Who knows, one day I might lose you too, Lakshmana. And embracing Jatayu, he says, "Oh, my father, really, did you see Sita?" But Jatayu lay speechless on the ground. And after a few moments, the great bird, the great King of the eagles, Jatayu, speaks again in a low voice. Be not afraid, Rama. You will surely find Sita. No harm will come to her. This is great reassurance. And regaining the treasure you have lost, you will greatly rejoice. And with these last words, he spits out the blood and gives up his life. They were foolish and committed errors of omission and commission and lost Sita, and trying to save Sita from the calamity that their carelessness had brought upon her. Jatayu, though old, though unarmed, has fought with wing and beak and talent and given up his life. And so when their father died, their own father in Ayodhya, his obsequies were performed by Bharata and Shatrughna. And Rama and Lakshmana were denied the privilege of this. Now they have an opportunity to set things right. And so we leave that story off for the time being. So we'll pick this up next week. And so just to recall, what are the lessons here? And we can now see a number of things happening. Not only is Rama's hope restored now, his determination and his courage is rallied, but also he sees that Dharma has an adjustment. His own father, he couldn't do the obsequies when he died, but now he has a chance, because doing it for Jatayu and doing it for Dasaratha is the same thing. So we leave it off there. So thank you. All right.
Thank you, Swamiji.
Thank you, Swamiji.
Thank you.